Hi, Liberators. This is Tiffany Coleman once again with another episode of Interesting People. Today, I have the Reverend Lacette Cross with me. Just a little bit about her. She is the pastor of Restoration Fellowship, RVA. She is the co-founder of Black Pride, RVA, and she is a grad of my alma mater, the St. Dewitt Proctor School of Theology, and where she received her MDiv and is currently working on her doctoral degree, where she is working on finding ways to help Black clergy develop a sexual ethic. She holds a THM from Union Presbyterian Seminary, and she is a lover of reading good books, and she loves spending time with her friends. It is with pride and pleasure that I welcome and introduce to some and present to others the Reverend Lacette Cross. Welcome.
Thank you. That was very nice.
I try. So, today, our topic of discussion is sexuality and sex and all of these taboo subjects. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about sex and sexuality. So, we wanted to. I came up with that like that. I was really excited about that. So. It's the little things. So just kind of want to just jump right in on here in it. So what is sexuality and how do we define it? Like what is it?
So I think, well, first, thank you for having me on Liberated Minds, Liberated People. Nope, I got it wrong. It's Interesting People under Liberated Media. Yay! Is your company.
That's who we are.
And so really grateful to be here. And so I think it's better to help people understand that the term of sexuality is defined in a very broad way. And so when I work with people, I tell them that it encompasses three particular things. Sexuality is about our behavior. How are we engaging with others with our bodies, right?
Okay.
It is about our identity, how we show up in the world, what is the sense of who we are, and it is about our expression, right? What does my hair look like? What clothes am I wearing? How do I present myself in the world? And so sexuality is such a broad concept that it is sometimes hard to be concise in its definition. But I invite people to go to the World Health Organization, WHO, and I can share these links with you, Tiffany, to share with your viewers. And they provide a really deeply expansive definition of sexuality, because what people often forget is that sexuality encompasses not only our sex and our gender understandings, but it also encompasses, involves or includes our pleasure, and it includes our reproductive health and our reproductive capacities. It includes our relationships and how we interact with people. It includes all the ways in all the ways in which we wish to be well and to be whole. And so in my work that I do, talking about sex and faith, I use these three particular areas of behavior, identity, and expression. But I will share with you the link that has a really in-depth and broad definition of sexuality.
Perfect. Okay, so honestly, like for me, the major takeaway in listening to what you just said, it sounds like sexuality is something deeply, deeply personal. And it is something that, it sounds like it's something that really nobody has any place to question or to interrogate or to judge even. I don't know, just based on what you just said.
I mean, you're absolutely right? Our sexuality is tied to the fundamental aspects of our humanity, right? So in me being this Black femme, fat woman, that is my sexuality, right?
Not
and
fat.
so,
Come on, Lacette. Like,
pudgy.
Pudgy.
I'm a
squishy.
voluptuous.
There we go.
Squishy.
I love that word. It's such Love it. Voluptuous is fine. I'm okay with this. Squishy is also acceptable.
Acceptable. And I use the word fat as a more of a like political resistance term, so that people who engage in fat phobia try to minimize our existence as larger bodied people,
Sure, for
right? And
sure.
so
Yes.
I use that, but also to say, like, you're absolutely right, right? Like, my sexuality is uniquely mine, just like your
Mhm.
sexuality is uniquely yours. And
Mhm.
when we talk about interrogation, the only people we need to be interrogating are the people that we're choosing to share our bodies with, right?
For
That we're
sure.
choosing to engage in intimate ways with our bodies, and our relationships with, right? But as it relates
Mhm.
to like judging people, or thinking that we have somehow permission to know the intricacies of their lives based
Mhm.
on their sexuality, that you're absolutely right. That is wrong.
Mhm.
And it is an area that all of us can continually learn how to not do.
Mhm. Mhm. And so, okay, so just to preface everything for the watchers, for the viewers, and the listeners, because this is also a podcast. Lisette is actually in a space where there is some construction going on today, so there are thuds and things that you will hear in the background. Where it happens. Being in the space that we're in right now with COVID and all of this, how we're social distancing, we have to become creative, and we also have to make room for things we normally wouldn't make room for. So if you hear a thud in the background, guys, it's because there is some building going on. And so, yeah, just so you know. Yeah. So I find that the easiest way to deal with things like that is to just say what it is, and so we can move through it and work through it, and it's fine. So it's something that we don't have
Thank
control
you.
over. Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
so, but it's thinking about what you're saying about the whole idea of sexuality is that I feel like we just kind of have to leave room for people to explore that. And honestly, it is something that is just between me and the person I'm with, not necessarily something that we have to have a discussion about. It's something that is deeply personal. And I think one thing we don't allow for, not just when it comes to sexuality, but for birth control, for anything else, is that we don't allow things to be personal.
We live in a society in which particular types of bodies,
For
um,
sure.
particularly female bodies, it is assumed within a patriarchal society that
Yeah.
we deserve to be controlled and told how to navigate or what to do with those bodies. So
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. We have to be very self-aware of how we are navigating our individual definitions and operating concepts of sexuality.
Yeah, for sure. So okay, so in thinking about that and moving in the vein of sexuality, the you can't say sexuality without sex. So so let's talk about that. Like, so how do we have open and honest dialogue about sex, and then how do we make this not taboo, not such a taboo subject? Because the reality is that you and I would not be sitting here if it weren't for somebody somewhere having some sex. Like, a lot of the people around, we have 7.5, I think, billion people in the world. It's a whole lot of sex going on, right? And so, I mean, outside of like test tube babies, and I know a few test tube babies, and they're great people, but there's a lot of sex happening. So, why is it taboo, and how do we begin to open up and have honest discussion about sex?
That question around the taboo nature of this sex conversation
Hmm.
is, I think, profound, particularly for people of faith, particularly for people
For
who
sure.
live, both in the church or what I like to call church adjacent, right?
Hmm.
And so one of the first places I believe that we have to make the conversation of sex normative is within the homes, right? That
Hmm.
sex education begins with parents. That those of us who may parent children are In my case, you know, an auntie or an extended family member of kids need to be telling them how to use the appropriate names of body parts, penises, vaginas, you know, breasts, those types of things. And then I think once we move from that like foundational place of like, we can talk about shame-free sex within our homes, then we can begin to move into a public space, even our public schools, right? I am an avid advocate for, you know, comprehensive sex ed within the public school system, because we need to be teaching, right, and making it a normative part. And then the last arena that you and I know, you know, a lot, not only just from going to seminary, but from being a part of the church, that the church has a significant role in normalizing this conversation, right? And not being silent about it, and in not shaming us or causing us to feel guilt around discussing it, right? I believe, you know, from a historical perspective, that the topic of sex became taboo when the church became a part of the political state. And when people who are in power are trying to control masses of people, then that means the type of knowledge and information that is shared or that is approved to discuss comes from the top. And so here we are in 2020 having to unlearn this kind of inherited taboo around sex, that all of us, you know, in some way, shape, or form are impacted by. And so if we think about beginning today, right, to your viewers and your listeners, then you have to begin to ask yourselves, what makes me uncomfortable when I get an opportunity to talk about sex? And what are the things that I need to do to begin today to make this not a taboo subject?
Yeah, because I think honestly, if we started viewing sex as something that is natural, just as natural as something as puberty or something, it's even part of the life cycle. That it's just something that we normally do. It's a part of our life. It's a part of it's just a part of our society. And then remove the quote unquote ickiness or the disgustingness about it from it, and just have a real, just natural discussion about it, because it's a natural thing. And so, and even, and you know what's crazy is I had never thought about this until I honestly had this discussion in this moment. Because the church has done quite a number with sex. And again, I am a harsh critic of the church, but I also deeply love the church. So, you know, it's a very, very give and take.
Me
It's a give and
too.
take thing.
Me too.
For sure, for sure. And so I just wonder how many bad marriages could have been prevented if we allowed people to be open and honest about sex. Like,
How many, yeah, and how many of us could have been spared the hurt and the pain and the shame related to being sexually violated
for
before
sure,
we were able to give consent, right?
for
Like
sure.
the layers are deep and complex to
Absolutely.
that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And um I think it just kind of comes down to us relearning and unlearning some things. Um and then again, and something else you mentioned that I have just been that's just kind of been kind of circulating around in my sphere, is the idea of shame, and how shame is such a bear. It's such a bear, and how it colors so many things.
Oh my
Um
goodness.
you know, and
It's
how
deep.
it, yeah, you know, shame is, I think it has more tentacles than I think we realize,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
and the work to displace shame must begin with first acknowledging that one is experiencing shame.
Mhm.
That's how
Mhm.
healing happens, right?
Mm.
We have to name, you know, the thing. We have to make
Mhm.
the implicit explicit in a
Mhm.
way so that we can then begin to just peel it's like the layers of an onion. You just
For
begin
sure.
to slowly peel those layers back,
For
and
sure.
peel them back, you begin to not only discover your own personal healing, but also discover all of the ways in which intersecting systems of oppression have positioned many of us to continuously wrestle with shame, or unlearn and then relearn how to live outside of a shameful bubble.
I mean, even because if we're going to talk about sex, you can't not talk about the body. I mean, even no, I'm not suggesting that we all walk around naked. I'm not suggesting that. Like, I don't think the masses want to see this naked, but I think.
You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know what the masses want to see. You don't know.
But I mean, just the whole reality of like how we walk around and cover our bodies, or how we, I mean, I can't tell you how long I was ashamed of my arms. Like, I wouldn't let my arms out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just how much shame covers from down to what we wear, to how we think, to how we go along walking in the earth. Like, I remember and often I feel shame just for like my body being the size that it is. Now, there are health risks and things, and I get people wanting to help me to be healthy, but like just not feeling comfortable in my own skin because I feel ashamed of the size of it, or, like, it's just interesting how shame covers so much of how we govern ourselves.
Stereotypes, tropes, fetishizations, right? Assumptions about one's health based on their size, right?
For sure.
This goes back to your comment that you asked, comment that you made earlier in the question around the judgment piece around sexuality, right? That our bodies end up being the first site of judgment, external judgment, right? That then we grow up and start internalizing, right? And so when we begin to, again, peel those layers back, it begins with this full embracing and acceptance of this flesh, this body, right? This ability to move, this ability to feel sexy, this ability to engage, right? And I was at a conference a couple of years ago. Sister Song puts on a conference that's called Let's Talk About Sex. And I was in a particular workshop, and this workshop was specifically about how to engage in sex or to feel sexual as larger bodied persons. And so one of the topics in that was like reducing or unlearning the shame around particular sexual positions that sometimes larger bodied persons may need to add a pillow, right? Or may need to use a certain type of assistance, right? Whether it's a pillow or it's a bolster or it's something else, right? And move in certain ways in order to achieve pleasure with another person, right? Or even pleasure, with one person. But it still comes down to like, to even be in a room in that moment with probably about 50 other larger bodied people, we all were unlearning that shame, right? Related to the most fundamental aspect of what it means for me to intimately relate to another person. I'm still trying to be okay with my own body in that moment, even though I want somebody to celebrate this body and exchange pleasure through this body. So yeah, the layers are deep, child. The layers are deep.
Because even to the point where people think that a fuller figured woman is not a sexual being, that she's incapable of feeling or wanting or having sexual desires.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is a work, right? Like, think about the types of critiques that a Lizzo receives, right? When you
For
think
sure.
about the ways in which those of us that grew up in the church, who have shapes, like like I have a behind. I can't hide it. You could try to put me in a potato sack. It is not going to matter, right? You're going to notice that I'm just like, it's
I
like
get
this
it.
idea of like, you cannot change people's body. Like if you have an issue with my body, take it up with the creator. Right? It's not mine. And so don't lay out those assumptions on me. Don't lay out your control of my body. Don't lay that out on me. And particularly as Black women in Black church context, we often are the ones responsible for covering our bodies or somehow manipulating our bodies so as not to entice men, right? So as not to somehow make men, who for whatever reason can't control themselves, right? It's now my responsibility to control them.
Not. No, it's not. Like it, and I get so agitated and irritated when people talk about how it was your fault that he was looking at your boobies. No, okay. So there's a whole thing of modesty and all that other stuff. Again, that comes back to the shame topic and all of that stuff. Like, I'm not talking about clothing. I'm talking about the fact that a grown man does have control over what he sees and how he responds. I see a fine man all the time, but I don't jump on him and like tear his clothes off. Like I have control over that. I have control over that. And asking a man to control himself is not too much to ask for. It's not. It's not my fault that you are attracted to me or find something. I mean, you have eyes, don't you? Like, I mean, it's just, that's the reality. Like,
Exactly.
It's yeah. So it's, and that's a whole that's a whole thing for me. Like I could go on and on about that. I have to get us back on topic here, but okay. So and just to kind of bring it back, that we have to explore and realize that we have to pull back that shame, that whole barrier of shame around the topic of sex and sexuality. That it's a very natural thing, and it's something that we can talk about without shame and be open and honest about it.
It is possible.
It is possible, and in talking about sex and sexuality has kind of had like a I don't want to call it like a resurgence, but like it's a moment where people are asking and are finding out that sexuality is not a linear thing. It's not linear, and it's not monolithic. So, and it's this whole, and there's also the idea of gender, and that gender in discussion and in theory is not linear either. And so how do we define gender identity, and then what does it mean to be non-binary and binary and cisgender and all of these topics or these words that we hear floating around today? What is all of that? Because it's confusing.
You're absolutely right. I love answering this question because it really does, for those of us who are people of faith and who believe in God as creator, it really is so sorry about the banging. It really is an homage. It is an homage to the diversity of the creator.
Okay.
And so the understanding of gender is socially constructed. Gender is how we classify human beings when they enter the world. So when a baby is born, we look at the individuals, we look at the baby's genitals, and we determine what sex they are. Okay. So if a baby is born with a penis, we say that they're a male. Okay. If a baby is born with a vulva, we say that they are female.
Right.
So gender identity, right? So that is commonly understood as the sex assigned at birth, right? So assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth. So what happens is gender identity, right, is an internal sense of myself. Okay. So my identity is about what I feel, how I feel about myself in my heart. So my
Okay.
gender identity may match up with the sex I was assigned at birth, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
If it does, then I'm a cisgender person. For example, my name is Lacette. I'm assigned female at birth. I feel like a woman and a girl in my heart, and so therefore I am cisgender.
Okay.
Cisgender, CIS, is the Latin for same. That's why it's called cisgender. For individuals who are assigned a sex at birth, but their sense of themselves, that's what identity is about. Identity is about one's own self-concept. If that gender identity does not align with the sex that they were assigned at birth, then they are transgender, right? So assigned male at birth person, right? Someone that was born a boy, who then grows up and says, actually, my gender identity is as a girl, would be
Okay.
identified as a trans woman, right? Or a trans girl.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So now that you understand, like, okay, there's sex assigned at birth, there's this sense of gender identity, then that means that if I'm cisgender or transgender, I'm either the same or I am different, transition, right? But
Okay.
individuals who are non-binary may have been assigned female at birth, but as they grew into their own sense of who they are as a gendered person, as a gendered individual, it does not match being either a male or a female, or a
Okay.
girl or a boy,
Wait.
or a
Time
man
out.
or a woman.
Time out. Flag.
Yes.
Flag on the play. Okay. So
Flag on
just
the play.
flag.
Okay.
Okay. So all right. So just to make sure I'm up to speed. All right. So uh, so we're born, and based on the physical characteristics of the body, we identify what somebody is.
Correct.
Okay. So if you have a penis, you're a boy. If you have a vulva, you're a girl. All right.
Correct.
So then they grow, people grow up and stuff like that. Things
Yes.
happen, all kinds of stuff like this. And then, but where it comes talking about the identity,
Yes.
it means what a person feels about themselves.
Correct.
So again, it's a very internal, personal thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So somebody inside feels that they are, let's say, I'll use myself. I'm a woman, and I fully embrace the fact that I'm a woman. I love being a
Yes.
woman. I
Yes.
embrace my womanhood and all the things that come with it.
Yes.
I'm a cisgendered woman.
Yes.
My feelings are the same, along with, because you said cis is the same. So what I feel and how I'm identified are the same. So
Correct.
therefore, I am a cisgendered woman.
Yes.
But on the
And
contrary,
there's no ED. There's no ED. You are cisgender. Just like you
oh,
are
okay,
black, you are cisgender. Like,
okay,
gender
gotcha.
is an identity.
So
So
sorry.
so
Okay,
to ED it, that's okay. We're learning. You're learning. And
okay.
so I'm just helping your viewers and listeners recognize that when we add ED to it, then we make it a noun, right? So you're not performing it. You are cisgender. Like
Okay.
that's an identity.
Because if somebody wrote it to me and said I blacked it, I'm gonna be pissed. So.
Or I'm shorted, right? Like, I'm shorted. Like, no, I'm not. I am short.
When did you
Period.
do it? When did you do it? Oh, okay. So I am cisgender. So now if
Yes.
somebody grows up, like you say, now the opposite would be me being born a woman, and I don't like it. I don't feel that this is right. Like there's something wrong about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm uncomfortable. Being a woman doesn't feel right. And so I decide to have my body contoured so that I can feel better about myself.
So while that is a potential, while what you are articulating is a potential outcome of it,
Okay, okay.
I'm going to take you a step back and say that when an individual comes to an internal sense of their gender being different than what they were assigned, right? So if someone is assigned to be a girl, but they began to grow up and notice the people around them and are like, you know what, I feel more like a guy, like internally, like my sense of who I am is like I'm a guy, I'm a man, I'm a boy, right?
Okay.
That is the impetus for most, if not all, for at least how I understand it from my siblings, my trans and non-binary siblings, that there is an internal sense of I am fundamentally in the wrong body because my identity and how I see myself is as a man or is as a woman, whatever the gender
Okay.
is.
Okay.
Or for the non-binary people is as neither. I am neither male or female. I am an individual that can be fluid, that can express in one way but show up in another. I can make decisions. So one's gender identity is purely an internal sense of self. And
Oh.
then to your point, Tiffany,
Mhm.
I may choose to align my external presentation to my internal sense of self.
Okay. Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, and in theory, and I don't want to oversimplify this, like, because it's a very complex, intricate thing.
It is, yeah.
But do you think that gender roles? Do you think if we dismantle that, like, is does that play a role in any of this? Like, I've always wondered about that. Like, what role do gender roles play in this?
I mean, gender is socially constructed, right? So
Right.
if
Okay.
I say,
Yes.
as soon as we learn that a person who's able to get pregnant has conceived a child, what are
Hmm.
the first questions we're asking?
Is it a boy or a girl?
Okay,
Do you
and
know
why
what
are
you're
we
having?
asking that, right? And
I
why are
don't
we
even
asking those
know. I don't
questions?
even know why we asked that question.
When someone who is anticipating the birth of a human and they're planning their nursery, what do they have to consider in that?
Oh, like the colors and what kind of animals to get and all of that type of stuff. And yeah, 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 yeah.
Right? Social
Uh-huh.
construction,
Uh-huh.
right? If
Uh-huh.
I said this person is a doctor,
Uh-huh.
what is the gender that you assume about that person?
You're asking a free thinking person, so I mean, I don't know if
I
you're gonna
am, but
get okay, so I'll play along.
asking a
A
free thinking
man.
person, but
A man.
right?
A
Okay,
man.
but if I said an individual was a teacher, what would you say?
A woman. That's the image that by default that comes. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. So
Yes.
we're talking about social construction, right? That gender
Gotcha.
and gender roles are socially constructed. When I said
Gotcha.
this person who is in this household brings home the most money, what gender is that person?
It's a man.
Right. So again, when we
Mhm.
talk about, you're very on point around the complicated nature of this, which is
Mhm.
what causes a lot of us who are new to this work, or who
Mhm.
are trying to understand the experiences of trans people and non-binary people. Their
Mhm.
minds are just blown, right?
Mhm.
Because the layers are deep. And
Mhm.
for many of us, we went along to get along, because this
Mhm.
is, like, I'm a cisgender woman. I'm cool with, like, okay, these are all the things.
Mhm.
But to your point, you
Mhm.
said, well, I'm a free thinking person, and so therefore, right, I'm now gonna bust up
Mhm.
these binaries or
Mhm.
these social
Mhm.
constructions, right? So
Mhm.
there are those of us who navigate the world with a hermeneutic of suspicion, and there are
Mhm.
those of us who navigate the world just as we're used to, or as people tell us. I'm a
Mhm.
woman, my place is to marry a man, I'm going to have 2.5 babies, I'm going to care for a home,
Mm.
I'm not to,
Mhm.
right, like those
Mhm.
are the roles. Like
For
if I
sure.
was
For
a man,
sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
would, ensure that I found me a wife, that I would then make sure that I made enough money so that
Mhm.
I could take care of said wife and children, and make sure to give her whatever she wanted.
Mhm.
Those are the roles, right?
Mhm.
So all arenas of life began to be constructed by that. So when somebody says to you, well, I'm non-binary, initially it blows our mind because we're like, what in the world does it mean to not be binary? Like, what is non-binary? But also it by the declaration of one's gender identity being non-binary, they are disrupting a system that all of us grow up in. So now this person does not play according to the rules that all of us were socialized, right? And it then becomes second nature for us to live according. So here we are with our non-binary, and you will notice that I use the word siblings, right? Because gendered language such as brother and sister or man and woman, right? There's all the ways. Hey, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. All of these gendered ways in which our language is set up has to then be deconstructed, right? So when you hear me, or sometimes if you hear people say, you know, like I often say brothers, sisters, and siblings, because people don't identify as a brother or sister, right? So there are families that are learning, who have non-binary family members. They're learning, right? What is a niece and a nephew, right? What are they now called when they're not, they no longer fit according to the binary of male and female. So it's layered, right? It's layered. And I just want to indicate to your viewers and to your listeners that I worked for an organization, a nonprofit called Side by Side, and traveled across Virginia training people in all kinds of settings around this stuff. So I'm naming that as like they jokingly call it, did gay for pay, right? Like I traveled and taught folks this stuff around gender identity and sexual orientation. And I'm also queer identifying, I'm bisexual. So I do that work with a lot of people, or have done that work and still do it in different ways. And so under both people, and also the complexities of your listeners and viewers having to sit and process with it, because it is complicated, right? It is layered. And it is something that we all that many people are often just now being invited to wrestle with and to figure out the best language, and to not open mouth and insert foot, or to not inflict harm, unintentionally, and those types of things. So I just want to name that my articulation is because this is what I got paid to do, what I also love to do in teaching people. And I didn't just arrive to this, right? I've been doing this work for 10, 15 years, right? So just understand, for those of y'all that are listening or watching, that it's okay to be like, I don't get it. It's overwhelming. It's a lot, because it is.
And I think the important thing to assess is that everything, and when I say it, I mean everything. Everything is not black and white. We need to, when I say black and white, I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about, it's not clear cut. Like, I think that's the thing that we have a hard time understanding, is that we use these constructs in our society so we can be able to put people in places and assign different things. Like, okay, you're a boy, you do the heavy lifting, you do the driving of the trucks, you do the all of that stuff. And okay, so you're a woman, so you can't lift heavy things or drive heavy trucks. You do fluffy things like cooking and cleaning and all of that other stuff.
Yes.
Where the reality is that there are men who love to cook and can cook.
Exactly.
I mean, anybody out of the water, or there are women who can do heavy lifting because they can, like, they physically are able to do so. And so the reality is I think we need to approach people as people, and not just as, you're a woman, you do these certain things. You're a man, you do these certain things. Like, humanity is complex. Humanity is intricate. Like everybody
Yes.
has their own collection of things. And so to come to this
Yes.
person and assume that because they fit, they are this, because they are black and woman and round, she can cook. Like, no, not really.
That's
Not,
right.
yeah, no, it's not.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
I'm
That's
learning
right.
to cook right now. Like, I'm learning to do, to be really, to do good things. Do I love it? No. But you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, you know, like, I just think we have to start looking at people as people and not as
Yes.
something that I
Yes.
can quantify, you know, or I can,
Absolutely.
you know, you check
Absolutely.
these boxes and this and
Absolutely.
you know, I don't
Yes.
know. So you know, again, it's still a very complicated thing, but it's also
Yeah.
something that I think we have to kind of like rethink how we're thinking about this.
Absolutely. And
No,
we have to be willing to sit in the discomfort, right?
for
And
sure.
so part of any learning process is that discomfort piece.
Mhm.
But even in our discomfort, choose to lean into love. I don't
Mhm.
have to understand every single component of a thing
Mhm.
to simply demonstrate love and respect for said thing,
That's
right? And that's where,
amazing. Yes.
you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
that's where I think a lot of people, particularly people who are in the church or church adjacent, falter, is that
Yeah.
everybody doesn't understand transgender identity or non-binary identity,
Mhm.
and we don't have to understand it to still be able to lean into respect and lean into love until we're ready for, in good kind of Paul language, let the scales fall from our eyes and
Yes.
we're able to see differently, right? That we can
Yes.
lean into love,
Yes.
and not into the rhetoric of hate or
Uh
the rhetoric of relegating people to hell or relegating them to some other marginalized or exclusionary space.
Simply because they don't fit our degree of what we consider to be normative.
Absolutely.
And then at the end of it, I'm like, how dare we do that? How dare us? How dare you? Simply because you don't fit the narrative that is comfortable for me, I get to banish you. How dare you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's just you know, it's interesting because
Yeah.
this conversation has taken turns that I was not expecting, and I'm perfectly okay with it, and I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Um, so, and I kind of want to like kind of pivot here a little bit, not away from it, but and I kind of think we've kind of covered this, but I want to ask this question now, and even if we go back over some things you've already said, um, how do we embrace people of other genders and sexualities, and what does respect look like in these times when we're trying to embrace folks who are different
Oh
from us?
man, that's great. The first thing that respect looks like is
Mm-hmm.
using the pronouns and the names that people tell you that they are.
Okay.
If I tell you that my name is Lacette and my pronouns are they, them, or she, her, or he, him,
Mm-hmm.
then I expect you to refer to me as Lacette. And
Mm-hmm.
even as you may be learning how to potentially incorporate the singular use of they, them, to find a way to always honor that person's humanity. Respect
Mm-hmm.
looks like honoring someone's humanity, and their
Mm.
humanity is directly connected to the way that they assert how they wish to be called and how they wish to identify.
Mm.
You don't have to understand it all. Hell, when I started this work, I didn't understand it all.
Mm-hmm.
But respect looked like listening. It looked like closing my mouth before asking questions. It looked like resolving internally
Mm-hmm.
that I would seek to be in relationship with someone
Mm-hmm.
so that I can get to know them as a person and not stop at just this gender identity that I may not have understood. So I
Yeah.
like to tell people this story that at Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology, we are required to do an internship in, within the social setting, right? Or in a nonprofit, or, in the field, so to speak. My internship was at a transgender nonprofit in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
One of the program managers, her name was Miss Dupree, and she was a trans woman. This was this was back in 2010, 2009, 2010. That was my first time having been in a closer working relationship with a transgender person. I had an opportunity to ask her one day about her, who she was involved with romantically. And we were just, when you're in an office setting, you're just talking. And so she's like, yes, I have a boo. His name is this and whatever. And so I had developed enough of a relationship, and she had given me permission to ask questions as part of my learning. And I asked her, well, like, I didn't say, how do you identify? So I was like, oh, so I basically made an assumption, like, okay, so well, you're gay. And she just looked at me and was like, no, I'm a woman, I'm straight. I was like internally, I was like, oh,
gotcha.
This just blew my mind, right? I didn't get it. This wasn't and it also was not my space to tell her that her truth was not her truth. So she was a trans woman, which means that she was assigned male at birth. She identifies as a woman and lived her life as a woman. She was in partnership with a man, and she identified as straight. I didn't have to understand it at the time, but I did have to respect it. So I tell that story to people because in that moment, as many of us who enter seminary, we're still unlearning. We're still trying to figure it out. We're still stuck in some kind of biblical, literalist, fundamentalist ways of things, right? And so we're trying to like work out that stuff. And we just socially don't know the right thing to say or do. And so that moment has stuck with me, and I use that story in my teaching moments because that's how you show respect to people. Even after I asked a question and internally I was like, this makes no sense to me. I did not continue on to make her explain why she identifies as straight. You want to know why? Because it's her business.
For sure.
And it's her relationship. And it's how she chooses to express her sexuality, how she chooses to identify her orientation. And that is a deeply personal and individual choice. So respect in this moment and this day and age of Black trans lives matter, of Black non-binary lives matter, we have got to lean into respecting the humanity of the person. And choose to develop relationships not out of fetishization, not out of, ooh, I got a special trans friend, but out of like a true, sincere desire to be in community with people, to be in a dialogue with people, where we are all trying to fight for our liberation, where we're all trying to change the world that we're living in.
I think that is such a powerful story because it does bring it home. For me, and I hope it does for somebody else who's listening or watching, because respect comes down to you're a human form, and that's really all that it really all that qualifies. Like the other boxes that we have that we want to check off, they really don't matter. It's just that you're a human being, and I feel like that should be the measuring stick. Like, are they a human being? Like, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Everybody don't have 10 fingers. Everybody don't have it's just, and I'm oversimplifying it again, but like, are you a human being? And if the answer is yes, then I think that should govern how we treat each other instead of all these other things that we use. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Oh gosh, this just makes my heart feel all like it just, yeah, this is good. This is good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to move from here because there's a couple other things I want to make sure I cover with you. Uh, but respect is so important. And it has to do with how the person wants to be treated, not how you feel that they should be treated. And I think that's kind of what we have to go from, and all of that. One thing that has been populating in the news here lately is, of course, we have the race stuff going on and all of that, the movement happening, and also talking about Black Lives Matter. But there's a lot of homophobic rhetoric coming from folks centered around Black Lives Matter. And I wanted to talk to you about this, specifically because both of us happen to be Black, if anybody's looking. And we also happen to be folks who are church folk, and we care about people. What is your response to all of that? Like, and it's a lot of Black men coming out against the Black Lives Matter movement now. What is your response to a lot of this rhetoric that we're hearing now of discrediting the Black Lives Matter movement simply because somebody who happens to be same gender loving founded this organization?
Um, I, so my initial reaction is that this is how white supremacist, patriarchal systems operate, right?
Sure.
They put us against each other.
For sure.
And so I am not surprised at that. I think, again, our liberation is tied to one another.
Absolutely.
And with so many layers to dismantling the master's house, right? To refer to, Mother Audre Lorde, right? That because there are so many layers to the house, we really don't have time to be expending energy towards critiquing how somebody might be working on the West Wing while your work might be over there on the East Wing. Like there are too many layers to this thing.
Yes.
And the way that this system is constructed, it is so amiable, and it mutates before our eyes, and before we're even able to see it's changing, that we get so caught up in focusing on this homophobic rhetoric from people who may not even be doing the work, that they're trying to distract the people who are ready and are willing and are doing the work.
Don't have confetti.
Understand.
I need confetti. I need confetti right now.
Understand that they are also a pawn within a system. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I say to people who have homophobic rhetoric to the Black Lives Matter movement. Listen, if you don't want to join the Black Lives Matter movement, create your own. You want to know why you haven't created your own? Because you're too busy hating on something else. And you know what that is doing? That's distracting you from doing the analysis necessary to construct the platform for a movement that galvanizes large numbers of people the way that the Black Lives movement has. The movement for Black Lives may have been sparked by the killing of Trayvon Martin, but we are 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later, and we are still talking about Black Lives Matter. So I don't have any, I'm like, okay, that's them, they making noise. What is my movement work? What am I called to do? What is my little piece of change in, for me, my piece of the world is Richmond, Virginia. Yes. And how am I doing that? Mm-hmm. There's always going to be distractors to the work.
Yes. And the distractors may look just like you and me.
Oftentimes, unfortunately, they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the takeaway here...
Skin folk ain't always kinfolk, as they say.
Yeah. But the thing is that we got to keep doing the work, Lacette. We have to keep marching and beating the drum. We got to keep beating the drum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
I guess this last question would kind of close out this discussion for the moment, or just put a pin in it. How do we re-envision the world where all people, regardless of sexual or gender identity, are respected? What does that vision look like? Can you even see it?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, first, it is a world centered on pleasure, and not simply pleasure. When I'm saying pleasure, I am not just meaning sexual pleasure,
Right.
though it is often the sexually repressed folks who are the most ornery and the most hateful and the most ignorant, right?
Because
But
they
it is
need to
also
get
just,
some.
hello, that's a whole nother, that's a
Sorry.
whole nother interesting people conversation. But I
For
think that
sure.
that vision looks like pleasure. It looks like being pleasure centered. And so I often say, how do you embrace pleasure through your five senses, so that we
Mm.
expanded beyond the myopic view of just sexual pleasure
Mm-hmm.
in very broader sense, right? And pleasure as a part of political change.
Mm-hmm.
I think that once we embrace that, then we sometimes can actually more easily celebrate the diversity of our sexuality and the diversity of humanity as we understand it through sexual orientation, identity, and expression,
Mm-hmm.
when we are joy filled and clearer about what we're doing in the world. So I
Mm-hmm.
can link arms with a white gay man as quickly as I can a non-binary, gender fluid, individual that
Mm-hmm.
uses pronouns that I don't understand, because
Mm-hmm.
we are not only centered in our pleasure, but we are somehow connected toward achieving a common good. And for me, that common good is freedom. It is our liberation. And our
Mm-hmm.
liberation looks like a world where all of us can move freely,
Yes.
where and do that in a way where we are creating communities that are sustainable, where we are creating relationships that are helpful and supportive, where we are making the changes that we wish to see in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's where we're doing it, where that vision of the acceptance of all gender identities, all sexual orientations, and all matter of diversity, right? That comes
Mm-hmm.
in. It's like a beautiful quilt,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
squares come together to make this amazing tapestry, or to make this amazing, end product. And so that's my vision. And I
Mm-hmm.
know it's possible. It's possible in Richmond. It's possible anywhere. And we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that as long as we continue to find balance, we continue to lean into pleasure, we continue to cultivate healthy relationships, that we
Mm-hmm.
will continue to be able to make that vision a reality.
I love that. I love that. And I love you. I do.
Thank you.
This has been
I
such a
really
wonderful
appreciate
discussion.
it. It has been awesome.
I love
Thank you so
this.
much.
You have to come back on the show. Like I
I
will. I have
will.
to. We have to make that happen, because this has been
I will.
wonderful and fabulous, and such an eye-opening discussion for me. And I'm sure, I don't think any listening, hearing, seeing person couldn't take away something valuable from this. So thank you
Yes,
so
yes,
much
yes.
for
Thank
sharing with
you.
us,
Thank you
and
for
for being
inviting me.
here. Absolutely. Before
Yes.
we go, I always end the show with these Spitfire questions, the pivot questionnaire. I'm not
Okay.
sure if you're familiar with James Lipton, but he used to do it on Inside the Actor Studio at the end of his show. And
Uh-huh.
it's just a great way, I think, to end the show. It's lighthearted, because we did some heavy lifting. So let's do some light lifting, and just talk a little bit about you. So
Okay.
here we go. What is your favorite word?
Machinations.
What does that even mean? That's not a real word.
Um, it is totally a real word. machinations relate to the numbers and layers of movements that are part of making something happen.
Wow. Okay.
So what are the like for example, if we take a political example, right? Or in this moment, right? What are the machinations that are happening to prevent people from truly celebrating the Confederate statues from being removed, right? There are things happening in the background. So I like machinations. My friends tell me I use it too much.
All right. What is your least favorite word?
Obfuscate, mostly because I can't pronounce it.
What?
Obfuscate. Obfuscate means to shirk and or avoid one's responsibility.
Oh, well, that's based on the definition. I don't like it either. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
What turns me on is a beautiful sunset
Mm.
and stirring gospel music or spiritual music, but mostly gospel.
What turned you off?
Unnecessary meanness or
Mm.
deep tragedy that could have been prevented.
Mm. What is your favorite curse word?
uh Fuck. I don't know. Neck and neck with bitch, but fuck, yeah.
That's my favorite too, but okay. What sound or noise do you love?
The ocean,
Mm-hmm.
the
And
sound of the ocean.
what sound or noise do you hate?
Anything that's like a screeching noise, like fingers on a chalkboard, or like,
Ugh, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
So I think I don't. So initially I thought maybe a lawyer, but then I was like, well, no. So I'm gonna say like a makeup artist.
Oh, yes. Yes, honey. Yes. That's fine. Yeah. Um, what profession would you not like to do?
I don't want to do anything related to numbers. So like an actuary, scientist, or
I
an
got it.
accountant. I don't want to do that.
I get it. And lastly, if you believe heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Sit down and rest. That's what I need. That's what I need God to say. Sit down. Sit down and rest, because you've been doing a lot. You've been doing a lot.
Friends, this is the Reverend Lacette Cross. Thank you so much for your time and for the work,
Thank
the
you.
necessary work that you do. I
Thank you.
appreciate it and I support it and I love it. And thank you for
Thank you.
sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, friends, that's been another episode of Interesting People. To get more information about the show and everything that's going on, I advise you to go visit www.liberated-media.com for the latest and greatest about Liberated Media. And can folks reach out to you, Reverend Lissette, on social media or anything like that?
They can follow me at my name, Lacette Cross, on Instagram and on Facebook.
Perfect. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember to be kind to everybody you meet because you don't know what they're going through or what they've been through. Love each other as best you can, and let's try to do our best to make the world a better place for everybody. So this has been another episode. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.